Good morning, good afternoon. This is Guild 21 for the month of January of 2018. Can you believe we're in the year of 2018? It's exciting. My name is Greg Gray. I'm the Senior Vice President of Operations for VeriFacts Automotive. And this Guild 21 call this month is brought to you by the VeriFacts Symposium that's occurring February 12th and 13th. If you have not signed up for Symposium, I'd like to tell you a little bit about it so you can feel inclined to do so. It's going to be a fantastic symposium. If you're getting your invite, my suggestion is you go ahead and click on it and start submitting your information to get signed up. Day one, February 12th, from 8 o'clock a.m. till noon, we're going to have exhibitor sessions and clinics, and there's some great exhibitors that are coming to Symposium this year that are representing the industry in some unique areas. Then at 1 p.m. in the afternoon of the 12th, till 6 p.m. is when we're going to have the first session of Symposium. We're going to actually start with the ending this year. We've decided to do things a little bit different with Symposium this year, and I think you're going to like it very much. Kind of starting with the end in mind, we're going to start with the end and then work our way backwards from what we've done in the past somewhat. So usually when we leave conference, we leave with Symposium with a lot of fire and vigor in our belly, and how are we going to make this happen? So this year we're going to start with that, and then we're going to leave knowing how we're going to make this happen. You're going to hear a keynote session about tomorrow is today, and you can imagine what that means. It's, tomorrow is here. We're in the middle of what we need to be doing today to be effective. We're going to talk about how it affects the different constituents of the industry, the carriers, the OEMs, the shops, and it's all going to be pointing towards the consumer. The ultimate consumer is the focus of the symposium. It always is, and it will continue to be, and it's the focus of our industry. Day two will kick off at 8 a.m., last till about 6 p.m., so have your plans to be there the full day. We'll have insurers panels, OEM panels, shop panels. We'll have some VeriFacts awards and some Guild 21 awards during that day. Our MC is going to be George Avery. You don't want to miss George, and you can't get enough of George, so be there and be ready to be present and enjoy the event. We actually have some special speakers that I can't mention as of yet, but you're going to be surprised at some of the incredible speakers we have coming in for Symposium as well. So again, submit your invite. If you haven't received an invite and you'd be interested in learning more, go to info@verifactsauto.com. It is an invite-only symposium, but make your request at info@verifactsauto.com, and we look forward to seeing you there. All right, let's switch gears here for a minute, and let's get into Guild 21 mode, and let's go through the oath. If you have not declared your allegiance to the oath for Guild 21, you can do that by going to verifactsauto.com and clicking on the oath, or you can see it in the email that you probably were invited to this call today. There's a link there as well. So the oath is, we are repairers, insurers, and vehicle manufacturers who hereby declare the possibility of aligning our industry to a common vision, which puts the consumer first. We stand for sweeping innovation. We commit to transparent, customer-focused solutions. We are accountable to invent a radical new future where safety, efficiency, and a cost-effective process are our guiding principles. Thank you. Art, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I love hearing that oath, and I love thinking that it's a new year, 2018. And we normally start these calls and talk about how important this is and how the work that everyone on this call is doing somewhere down the line is actually saving lives. But as we're starting the new year, rather than making a resolution, I like to think about at this time next year, what do you want to have had happened? And then living the rest of the year with that intention in the back of our mind. So as we're going into this call, I'd love for you to walk away from this thinking, based on what we're learning here, and hopefully you'll go to the symposium, and based on what we learn in the symposium, how many lives can be saved? How many cars can be repaired more effectively? How many customers that have been in terrible accidents can we as insurers make their lives easier? As manufacturers, what tools, lessons, gifts can we give to the body shops to help make these repairs more effective? So as we're going to this call, as we're going to the symposium, I hope we start to keep this at the forefront of our mind. And speaking of the symposium, I have one more plug for it, and I will be there, so I look forward to hopefully seeing many of you there. But there are going to be some hands-on clinics the day before on Sunday, February 11th. It's a great learning opportunity to participate, and there's several different clinics. They include demonstrations, and they also include hands-on training. So these calls are wonderful in terms of thought, but going to the hands-on clinic and actually seeing, touching, doing can have a tremendous impact. So these demos include welding, MIG, MAG, STRSW, electronic measurement, alignment, paint refreshing, and vehicle damage assessment. And BMW, Honda, and Toyota will also be doing repair overviews. So this is all a one-day event. Transportation and lunch are included. Pickup and drop-off will be at the West and South Coast Plaza in Costa Mesa. It's a long day. Starts at 7:30. It ends at 6. And the initial fee is $147. If from your same organization you want to add additional colleagues get a discount. They're at $117. This is an amazing opportunity. And if you are interested, please email a request to info@verifactsauto.com for invitations and the registration links. So I really hope you take advantage of it because it sounds like a tremendous opportunity. So thank you for the plug. We have a great call today. Before I introduce our wonderful speakers, I want to remind you of how to interact during this call for people who have been here before. And for new people, I'd like you to hear that this is an interactive call. So if at any time during the call today you have a question, please press 1 on your phone and I'll call on you. If you have a burning question, you absolutely have to get this answered at this moment, you cannot think of anything other than this question being answered, please press 2 on your phone. And if you like what you're hearing, please press 5 for applause. We do have a screen share feature. You are going to be taken through a presentation, PowerPoint presentation. To join it, just open up your invitation yesterday or your reminder today. Underneath your PIN number, it says screen share. Click on that button. It will enter your name, and it will link you to sit back and enjoy watching the presentation. There is some polling today, so be ready. There are going to be a few times where we're going to ask you a question. And we'll say, if this is true, press 1 on your phone. If it's false, press 2 on your phone. We'll talk you through that, but I really hope that you participate because it creates a lot of feedback for the presenters and is also a lot of fun. So that said, we're very fortunate in that we have 2 speakers today. We have Doug Kelly, the CEO of Repairify, and Jake Rodenroth, the Director of Client Services of Aztec. So Doug has over 30 years of management experience in the technology and automotive industries. He joined Repairify, the makers of the Aztec TM device, as CEO in 2015. Before that, he led the successful spinoff of Syncast, the technology division of Fix Auto. Earlier in his long career, he was president of Fix Auto, director of sales for Ventro Corp., Vice President of Professional Services of Industrial Solutions, Ventro and Industrial Solutions both being B2B technology companies. He also spent 13 years with the DuPont Performance Coatings business, where he held a series of senior management positions. One thing you might not know about Doug is he has a Christmas tree farm. It has about 5,000 trees, and it was inspired by a father-son tradition. Now, his children thought he was crazy to go out in the woods and plant trees on his day off, but he actually finds it incredibly therapeutic. Now, Jake, who is the Director of Client Services of Aztec, is headquartered in Plano, Texas. He's been in the automotive business since 18, starting as a technician for Mercedes-Benz. He followed that with 13 years at Austin's Auto Body, working in various roles. He's really learned the business from the ground up, and he helped the company become a Jaguar and Land Rover structural aluminum certified facility in 2004. Jake recently came over Abra Auto Body and Glass, where he served on Abra's integration team and helped add over 100 repair centers to the company's portfolio in less than 2 years. He also helped build and support a technical hotline for all ABRA locations. At CDS, Jake is responsible for product integration and training in the collision industry for the company's revolutionary diagnostic interface, the Aztec TM. So one thing you may not know about Jake, and this is kind of funny because it is the polar opposite, if you will, of Doug, is he has a real passion for race car driving. His father was a professional race car driver who was actually in a race with Dale Earnhardt a few weeks before he passed away, and has participated in the 24-hour race in Daytona. Jake also drives. He runs with the Porsche Club, is very active in the amateur circuit. Daytona is his favorite race, and his absolute favorite one was his first there, where he actually had the opportunity to be on the radio with his dad in the pit. While he has crashed cars, hit walls, never been injured, he hates roller coasters. So while he's a thrill seeker, he likes to be in control. So we have our Zen side and our action side, but both absolutely love cars. So Doug and Jake, I am going to turn it over to you.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for the intro, and thank you for VeriFacts for allowing us to be here today. So before we jump into this, there's a lot of buzz out there about emerging technology, not just the electronic side, but also on the metals and substrate side. And I think it's leading companies like VeriFacts that are out there pushing that message down to the repairers and trying to create an awareness around this technology and how far it goes with a consumer. So I put together a couple of slides here to talk about how, from a process perspective, how can a shop approach this and work it into their daily workflow. So a couple of things that you're going to see at the top highlighted in red here. It starts with identification, and really we can't, as repairers, can't get on the same page with identification until we've got product knowledge and we stay up to date on modern vehicles. And that identification can include the ADAS and frequency reducing technology. This technology is really hidden in the cars. It's hidden in the windshields, in the glass, in the mirrors, behind grills. It can be very difficult to spot. And what we're seeing is that with mainstream vehicles, the trim levels really dictate how much technology the car actually has. Then we get into repair versus replace scenarios and pulling up structural identification maps of the different substrates on the car. That has a direct effect of what the joining methods are going to be. Can we repair this component? There's a lot on our plate when we start thinking about that kind of stuff. Third one on there you're seeing is hybrid and EV powertrains. Seems like everybody from a manufacturing standpoint is getting into the hybrid and electric vehicle game. So you're seeing that there's a lot of those cars out there that have specific procedures around cooling systems. They have advanced propulsion systems. So even fundamental skills that we've taken for granted for years and that we've been trained on by our brothers and our fathers and our grandfathers, those procedures have changed kind of right under our nose. Things like changing a radiator support. We can no longer assume that our 30-year journeyman technician knows how to do those things. The OEM repair procedures will play a big role and continue to play a big role in the vehicles that we service every day. Special tool requirements. So there's a look at the YF1234 AC refrigerant. That's just one example. You have vehicles out there that are rivet bonded together. They have different types of joining methods, and certainly the tooling becomes a big concern. And really it comes down to what kind of cars are you fixing the most of. And then you start getting into the scanning discussion, and it's really hit the ground in the last couple of years with the position statements being released. And those are the things that we're going to talk about today. So we came to our first question. And Hart, I don't know if you want me to read that. Are you going to read that?
Go right ahead.
Okay. So do your customers know what equipment / options are on their vehicles? So A, yes, or B, no.
So just to reiterate, if your customers know what equipment options are on their vehicles, press 1 for yes on your phone and 2 for no. So if your customers know the equipment options available, press 1. If they do not know, press 2. So the numbers are coming in.
Okay.
Coming in slowly but surely. So again, if yes, press 1. If no, press 2. And the results are in, wow, they're pretty skewed. Only 13% said yes. and
Okay.
87% said no, they do not know what equipment options are available.
Perfect. Okay. So that's a great response. And, I think that you'll see a shift in those responses in the coming years as more millennials enter the workspace and start buying cars. They're not intimidated by technology. In fact, they embrace it. So they want to buy cars that have lots of technology on them, and they're going to understand how every feature works. So I think in the coming years as repairers, that's something to keep an eye on. So the second question, how do you and your staff stay up to speed on current model vehicles? So A, secondary sources such as the internet, OEM websites, dealers, etc. Look up build data, or C for other.
So again, press 1 if it's secondary sources, press 2 on your phone if it's look up build data, and press 3 on your phone if it's other. So again, how do you and your staff stay up to speed? Press 1 if it's secondary sources, internet, OEM sites, dealers. Press 2 if it's look up build data, and press 3 if you're using another resource. So the numbers are coming in. Keep them coming. Again, press 1 on your phone if you're using secondary sources, 2 if you're doing look up build data, and 3 if it's other. So the results are coming in. And again, we have a pretty big skew here. We have almost 75% using secondary sources. We have 15% using lookup build data. And we have a little over 10% using other. So for the people that said other, I'm going to randomly call on you because I'm curious as to what other sources that you're using. So Peter Pratt, you said you're using another source. Peter, would you mind sharing that?
Yeah, I've been thank you for having me, by the way. This is a nice forum. I've been an iCar instructor for many years, so I have a direct link to iCar, and I go to them quite a bit, help them do a little bit of work for me, so to speak. But that's not to say that I don't look up build data and or go to secondary sources like OEM sites and so on and so forth, because you can't cut through a rocker panel anymore without having the repair manual. You don't know what's behind it. You don't know what's running through it. There may be computers inside those cavities. Who knows what's going on? So the more we can actually stay connected to sources, other sources, including A, B, and C, and then some, the merrier.
Thank you, Peter, for your insight. I'm going to call on one more, Rick Cope. Rick, you're on the line. What other sources are you using?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, Rick, I don't know if you're listening. I'm going to put you back on mute because I hear you chatting with others. Let's see if there's someone else who's using another source. How about Daniel Austin? Daniel, you're on the line. Do you mind sharing with us what other sources you use? Daniel, you might have muted your phone.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Yeah. So actually, my experience, excuse me, my experience is from an interaction with the shop level. I'm not actually a shop owner. I'm one of the providers. And so my answer was sort of based on that interaction with the shops and the feedback they give me as far as the sources they use.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing. Right. I think we're ready to go back to our presentation.
All right. Well, all of those were fantastic answers. I look at it like collision repairers are facing brand new models, sometimes on the first tank of gas. It seems like consumers leave the dealership and then they get hit. So we're the front line of defense. And I think that every shop needs to have some sort of path to resolution when they get a new vehicle. Where are they going to get the information? And staying current as much as possible internally is important. So I'm going to turn this next slide over to our CEO, Doug Kelly.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for participating in this important forum that has been set up for us. This next piece about authorization may sound pretty obvious, and obviously as repairers, you've been doing this for years in terms of getting authorization to perform the work. I think the nuance or the difference here is that when you come to diagnosing cars, especially on the pre-scan, for instance, and you're pulling data that might be historical in nature, it's important consumers understand what information is being pulled, and equally important for them to understand how it might be shared. In this instance, when you're doing diagnostics, whether it's with a third party or your own diagnostic tool, just keep in mind you're not pulling crash data. That's one of the things that consumers are probably most concerned about, is that black box data that measures speed and reaction prior to the accident. You're pulling all the stored trouble codes, and some of the European manufacturers, for instance, do a very good job of capturing what's called freeze frame data, and in doing so, it may reveal things that were not accident related. And if the consumer doesn't understand that this car has a history and that it's going to, in essence, not lie, it's going to tell the truth as to what's going on with it. Consumers, and I'm not suggesting consumers intentionally misrepresent the loss, but a lot of times they're not aware when certain systems go offline or how they went offline. And when you share that information with an insurance company, it's possible that there's certain things that aren't functioning in that vehicle that could be denied downstream. And what you don't want is the consumer coming back to you and being accusatory as to why did you share that information with their insurance company. So it's good housekeeping to make sure that you obviously get their permission and explain to them what you're doing in the process. The other thing is you have the other side of the equation where you've got certain carriers that under whatever circumstances may not agree to reimburse for that procedure, and as repairers you're not in the business of doing work for free. So it's important you get paid for this procedure. And if it's accident related, I don't know of too many insurers that won't pay for it, but there have been instances where carriers have said, hey, listen, you didn't find anything on here that's accident related, and we're denying the claim for that particular piece. And so, again, the pre and post authorization would really speak to making sure that the consumer understands that in the course of doing this, that there is a cost, and it's to their benefit, obviously, to know what's going on with that vehicle. So I put that out there. We actually built an authorization form. It's available on our website. I believe it's also on SCRS's website. I think iCar might have also republished it, but it's a generic form. It's not designed for any particular state. I always encourage people to review it with their attorney before they start using it, and then also to incorporate it as part of your already existing process to get customer approval. Jake, you could probably go to the next slide. So we put this next piece, hopefully folks can see it. It's titled Consumer Awareness, and it really speaks to that first question we polled on, where I think it was 13% said that consumers know what's on their cars. 30 days off the lot, they forget whether it had rain-sensing windshield wipers or heated whatever and adaptive cruise control. So what we try to do with this piece, and this is, again, feel free to copy it if you want to do it for yourselves, but we created this so that repairers could basically hand this out at the time they're receiving customers to help educate them as to all the systems that are on today's vehicles. Again, this is just a sampling of it, of course, but the idea is just to remind them how complex these vehicles are and what it's going to take to put it back into working order. And again, the rationale or the reasoning as to why those diagnostics are important. The other thing we did, and we think this is extremely helpful, is we've listed down questions, we said you should ask, meaning a consumer should ask, or even repairers for that matter, when making the decision around diagnostic services. We think it's really, really important. The reason that build data was asked as a question is if you arguably don't know what's on the car, it's possible you can misdiagnose some of the issues with it. We see certain tools that will return, we call them false positives. So they'll indicate an issue when in fact that vehicle didn't come equipped with that item in the first place. So it's important that, the build data is known. It's important that, whatever tools you choose to use are up to date and using the most recent versions. It's one thing to scan cars. It's another when you start reflashing and reprogramming. I always encourage people to really do their homework. The OEs today can update cars remotely while they're sitting still. So you might have a car company, for instance, that updates a car with the latest patch for a safety reason or a TSB or recall. And unfortunately, if the version of the tool you're using isn't up to date and being maintained, you could unintentionally undo a fix that the car company put in that vehicle. So I always encourage people, understand the tools you're using, understand the services that you're subscribing to, and whether or not they're up to date and using the latest licensed versions when they're working on those vehicles. I'll send it over to you, Jake.
All right. So this next question, I think, is a burning issue in the industry on all levels, not just diagnostics, but also on the body shop side, is how do you attract and retain young talent into the business? A, referrals, word of mouth. B, Votech schools. C, develop internally. Or D, hire from competitors.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, press 1 on your phone if you're using referrals, word of mouth. Press 2 if you're using Votech vocational schools. Press 3 if it's develop internally. And press 4 if it's hire from competitors. So how do you attract and retain young talent in the business? Press 1 if it's referrals, 2 if it's schools, 3 if you're developing internally, and 4 if you're hiring from competitors. And the results are coming in. It's interesting. This is a little more, we have one person that raised, that put a 5. So if you meant to hit a 5 on your phone, that's fine. If you meant to hit a different number on your phone, just hit a different number. 1 would be referrals, 2 would be Votech schools, 3 would be develop internally, and 4 would be hire from competitors. And the results are in. We have 2 people that hit 5 on their phones, so it looks like, I'm not quite sure if that means other. Perhaps that means other. And the results are in. It looks like 31% are using referrals or word of mouth. Almost 30% are using the schools. Another 30% are developing internally. And 8% are hiring from competitors. And that missing 8% is the people that pressed 5. So what that basically means is, I think, other. So it's interesting. It's pretty evenly split between the first 3.
Great. All right. Well, my 2 cents on that is that in any business, I think that you should try to hire for work ethic and character, that you can build the rest. So if you can find that young person that has that work ethic and character, I've found these individuals, whether they're waiting on my family at a table or restaurant. I found one in a grocery store one time where the service was above and beyond. But to get people that are interested in cars, I encourage you to attend car shows. A lot of these young kids will bring their cars out, and you kind of get to see what their work looks like. And you may get an opportunity to hire one of these individuals. And I think that gone are the days where you're going to just bring in a tenured person and expect them to hit the ground running. I think we're going to have to develop internally as much as possible. So, all right, so the next part. So pre-scan, when, where, and how. This is another burning issue out there. There's some parties and constituents that don't think it's necessary. Which cars should be pre-scanned? Trim levels certainly play a role here. Damage to electronic components. It's kind of hard to look at an electronic component and ask it if it's damaged or not. So doing the pre-scan helps identify those types of things. Potential unrelated electronic issues like maintenance and warranty concerns. I think all of us have had that consumer that comes in the shop and says, well, I'm paying a $500 deductible, so here's a grocery list of everything I want done. So those are things where, like Doug said, getting that authorization for the pre-scan in the first place will help alleviate some of that pressure. And if you see maintenance neglect and things like that, you can talk about that on day 1 of the repair when you're going over ECDs and when you're going to have, when the parts are going to arrive and things like that. Airbag deployments in hybrid vehicles are no-brainers. Every airbag deployment is unique based on how many occupants are in the car, were they wearing their seatbelt, what was their seat position, and what was their weight. So you want to determine what type of impact was this and what components need to be replaced. That pre-scan is really there so that we can identify a part purchase that needs to happen. Hybrid and EV vehicles, because of their powertrains and cooling systems, they're very scan tool dependent, and there's a lot of things that you can learn on a pre-scan with a hybrid or EV vehicle. Repair procedures that require scanning based on operation being performed. So an example of that was, there's very, very few shops that will research how to take a headlight out. And what they don't find is that at certain trim levels, that may be an adaptive headlight that requires a scan tool to make it active again. So that's an example of a repair procedure. that require scanning based on operation performed. So we're starting to see more and more ADAS calibration requirements. So that's the cameras in the windshield, that's the radar units on the front of the car, and even the rear of the car, where proprietary targets and a dedicated environment are required to calibrate the car. You want to schedule those off-site visits to the ADAS calibration centers proactively. Don't wait till Friday at 5 o'clock and say, hey, we need to get this camera calibrated. Certain cars will take as many as 4 to 5 hours, even 8 hours, depending on what kind of car it is. Some of them are quicker than that. So these are things that you want to make sure you communicate to the bill payer and to the vehicle owner. So it leads into repair planning. Set vehicle owner expectations up front so they understand how their car is equipped and what's required to make it whole again. Consider repair versus replace decisions very carefully, as many modern vehicles are constructed of non-repairable substrates and limited repairability around ADAS components. A good example of that is if we've got a quarter panel, it's got a 6-hour dent, and there's a blind spot module on it. Or if it's a Nissan and it doesn't have the blind spot module bracket welded to the new quarter panel, those are things that you have to be considerate of. You know, repair versus replace will be a concern around ADAS components. Part utilization.
Jake,
OEM after.
Jake,
Yep. Go ahead.
Jake, sure. This is Doug. We had our live example this week. We had in our calibration center, we had a car come in. It was all complete. The customer lost, so it was a comeback to the shop. The customer lost their lane keep assist. Brought the car in. We did work on it and determined that the aftermarket bumper and the way it was formed, and the lack of, you know, what you're describing as the bracket in behind, was a big determining factor in the ability for that system to work properly. So the car actually had to be sent back to the shop. OEM bumper has to be put on, and then it's going to have to go through its calibration again. So exactly to your point.
Yeah, that's where it leads in nice with that parts utilization piece. Watch bumper covers and windshields very carefully. A lot of your aftermarket windshields will have a plastic bracket that comes on the glass that is not serviced, and it can't be transferred or any of that kind of stuff. So if you're going to use aftermarket glass, you want to confirm that all of those things are in place prior to buying it. And there's a lot of specialty tools in regards to targets and things like that and processes. There's an immense amount of space that's required on some of these vehicles. Doug, how big is the calibration center in square feet?
4,500.
4,500 square feet. So there you go. So we have another question. A shop should interpret, implement, and audit OEM repair procedures into all repair activity on a damage report. True or false?
So this one's an easy one. Press 1 if it's true. You believe that a shop should interpret, implement, and audit OEM repair procedures into all repair activity on a damage report. And press 2 if you think that's false. So 1 for true, 2 for false. The numbers are coming in. It's looking pretty skewed here. So 1 for true, 2 for false, and almost 90% believe that is in fact true.
Okay. So, and the key word to this question is all repair activity. You know, you'll find some shops will look up structural procedures, they'll look up airbag procedures, but they won't look up how to take a fender off or how to take a hood off or how to take a bumper cover off. And that's what I mean by all. So, and I know that seems tedious, and that kind of leads into the next question here. Recently, General Motors surveyed 827 collision repair shops and found that 80% didn't pull repair information on every vehicle. Why do you think that is? A, don't have the time. B, the damage was minor. C, rely on technician experience. D, information was hard to find / interpret.
All right. So, just to reiterate, 80% didn't pull repair information on every vehicle. So why is that? Why didn't everybody pull repair information? So if you think it's 1, if they don't have enough time, press 1. If the damage was really minor, press 2. If they're relying on the technician's experience, press 3. And if the information was hard to find or interpret, press 4. I see we have a couple hands raised for 5, so I'm going to assume that means other. So 1, they don't have enough time. Press 2 on your phone if they didn't do it because the damage was minor. Press 3 on your phone if they didn't do it because they're relying on technician experience. And press 4 on your phone if you think the information was hard to find and interpret. So the numbers are coming in. I'm going to assume that 5 means other, and here's what we have. This is an interesting one. We do have one big winner, and the rest are fairly split. So a little over 10% thought it was because they don't have time. Almost 20% said it was because the damage was minor. Almost 45% are relying on technician experience. And a little over 15% said the information was hard to find and interpret. And almost 10% said press 5, which I'm thinking means other. So there were other reasons as well.
Okay. Well, the one that I see a lot of in the field is I don't have time, and for a variety of reasons. Either they have too much work or there's insurers putting pressure on them to get vehicles uploaded at a certain amount of time. The response is if we don't have time, we always have time when it's wrong. We always have time when the customer comes back and we have to pay for rental and we have to deal with them tapping their foot and very upset with us. So I look at it like, let's take the time up front, make a good repair plan, and communicate efficiently. The damage was minor. That's another one that's a myth. You know, I think that there's a lot of shops think it was just a scratch and there's no worry there. When you have certain systems like occupancy detection systems, for instance, that need to be calibrated and that gets missed, it's not so much the scratch on the door, it's everything we took apart to deal with the scratch on the door. So that's, you know, door handles and mirrors and things like that. And now you're seeing a lot of technology being loaded into keyless entry for door handles and blind spot monitoring for mirrors. So there's a lot of concern there. You know, in the technician experience, while they may be able to disassemble a vehicle and assemble a vehicle, it's hard to keep every vehicle's substrate map in your head, and certainly every piece of technology and how it works in your head. So relying on the service information is critical there. I will agree that the information is hard to find and interpret. I think that that's mission number one for OEMs, to try to make that a little easier to find, and offer day passes to the repair information that a shop could purchase. So just my 2 cents there. So Doug, you want to take this one?
Yes, thanks, Jake. This is a subject that's near and dear to my heart, having been at this as long now as I have. For folks that thought the pre and post scan discussion was kind of a big deal, you know, my words for what they're worth is that you haven't seen anything yet. What we're about to enter into with this calibration piece will dwarf any sort of discussion that you've had to date on pre and post scan. And the reason I say that is you know, today's best-selling passenger vehicle, the Toyota Camry, the 2018, comes standard with, you know, the auto braking feature that you see advertised on TV all the time. So this front-facing camera, anytime a windshield's replaced or work's being done on the front of that vehicle, you know, a calibration is now part and parcel of the process. And it's doubtful for me that many on the phone or many in the industry really fully understand the full scope of this. And in your defense as an industry, or our defense as an industry, it's partly because the OEs themselves haven't really come to terms with how it's to be done. All you need to do is spend a few minutes reading through the calibration repair procedures from each of the manufacturers to know that, one, they're all wildly different, and two, the recommended procedures sound like something from the Stone Age with, you know, plumb lines and string and measuring tapes and so on and so forth. Add to that the space requirements that Jake's referring to, and you set yourself up for a pretty complicated process. And therein lies the challenge. So there are huge unknowns in this space. I know there's a lot of people out there in the industry and certainly the dealer networks that are trying their hardest to do their best to recalibrate these cars after an accident. Glass companies face the same challenges, of course. But when I say this next thing, please don't think I'm being critical of folks, but many, if not most, are not doing it correctly. And they don't even know it, right? So this isn't an issue of people being mischievous or doing anything fraudulent. This is, they just don't know. Some of the repair procedures for today's systems that are coming on today's vehicles are still being written while the cars are on the road. There's certain safety systems out there that have a certain progression to them that the OEs themselves haven't quite figured out how to test those in real-world circumstances. So my point in sharing all this is that as you go forward and you think about pre and post and where it fits in the continuum of us having to evolve as an industry, that's just the table stakes. That's just to understand kind of what's going on with the vehicle. But let me also share another thing about the pre and post and these trouble codes is that and I'll give you an anecdotal example of what happened on our end. So we did a 2017 Toyota Corolla. If you use the Toyota targets that they provide, be careful when you print them out on your local printers. Depending on the settings in the printer you're using, they may not render to the exact size that the OE recommends. So when you send it to that printer, you actually double check that it printed out at the right size. But in our instance, when we printed it out, we calibrated the vehicle, took it out on the road, we lost lane keep assist. So the car thought it was calibrated just fine, but we actually lost a system. When we came back, hooked up a scan tool, we scanned the car, there were no trouble codes. So think about this, you've got a car that was calibrated successfully, or at least it thought it was put out on the road, tested, the system that was supposed to be working didn't work, we scanned it, there was no trouble codes. When we did the research, we realized our targets printed out the wrong size, as I just described. Printed out the right targets, the right size, recalibrated the car, lane keep assist came back online again. So when you think about the process of what you're about to enter into, even scanning in and of itself is not enough. If you advance to the next slide, Jake, one of the things you'll hear myself and others talk about continually is this need for a road test. We had another vehicle, I won't bore you the whole story, but turns out in that case the reason the system went offline is the consumer had actually configured that system not to be active. So keep in mind, many of these systems, even when they're on the vehicle, the customer has an override feature, either through the infotainment system or through a button on the dashboard, to turn those systems off. So if you haven't effectively determined whether those systems are enabled and actually road tested the vehicle to confirm that they're working, you can hand customers back cars that you think were successfully calibrated and really not have any sort of understanding as to whether that's true or not. So back to the previous discussion about build data, knowing what's on that car, many of these systems, they operate differently. So each manufacturer's lane keep might interact with the vehicle at different speeds and different conditions. Your technicians, whoever's doing the road test on this, whether it's you or you're subletting it out to others, it's really critical that you understand what systems you're servicing, that you're using the right targets, that you do the space requirements that are required. These can't be done outside in a gravel parking lot. It has to be a level surface. It needs to be out of direct sunlight. It has to have a certain space around it when you do it. And if you don't, kind of follow those instructions, my concern, quite honestly, is that you're going to be misrepresenting and potentially delivering back to the customer a car that's not safe for the road. And I know there's insurers on here, there's repairers and others that support the industry, but I think we all, at the end of the day, have the same goal in mind, and that's to return back to the consumer a vehicle that's fit for use and it's going to perform as planned. And heaven forbid it does get in a second accident, those systems operate as designed going forward. So with that, I think it's now question and discussion time, right, Jake?
Yes, any questions out there?
Yeah, so if you have any questions, please press 1 on your phone. If you have any questions, again, please press 1 on your phone. And I do see one hand up. All right, so Peter Zachary, I have to apologize, I am decimating your last name. Peter, you are on the line.
Okay, are you hearing me?
Yes, sound great.
Good, I've unmuted. Doug and Jake, it's Peter Siklai from Tuason Collision in Vancouver. Your conversation or your presentation today was much more wide-ranging than I would have expected, so I was very appreciative of that. But in this wide-ranging thing, I'm going to make a comment that I would really love to hear your opinion on, is everything has changed, but we're still pretending that we can fix it through the old ways. For example, how does any of these problems, road tests, diagnostics, patients, how does any of this fit into a flat rate pay system where everybody is hustling for dollars and trying to get it as quickly as possible? And that flat rate thinking extends from the insurance company through the shop owner to the technician on the floor. The entire industry is based on things being done and things being paid for without any respect for time. So there is a comment rather than a question, but Doug or Jake, I would love to hear your view on that.
Jake, I could take that one if you like. So our, we're very much in the education mode. We work closely with car companies. We work with insurance companies. I know Jake and others in our organization have presented to field staff with many large insurance companies. We do these sorts of events, and our intention is to not only get the word out in terms of what the potential issues are, but to come with solutions, to come prepared to talk to folks about how to solve some of today's problems. And we have an invitation out to motors who do the time studies to come in and work with us on some of these calibration pieces. Part of it is getting these things to go from being the unknown to the known. How much time is required to do a Honda versus a Toyota? How much is involved in a drive test and reinitializing these systems and making sure they work correctly? And right now, in this particular case, especially in the calibrations and the drive tests, a lot of it's the Wild West. When you talk to dealers, the prices are all over the map. When you talk to the OEs, their repair procedures are in many cases still being drafted and put into print. So, I don't think there's easy answers here. The problem with the collision segment, and this is it's a truism, is, we get the newest cars in the worst possible condition. And with the advent of all this new electronics on cars and all the safety systems, it's hitting us harder than it is the general population. So part of it is just getting on calls like this, talking to folks in your community, in your town, the associations, the various folks that are out there to help get the education out. Once we can have open dialogue and talk to people about what's involved in fixing that car, I think a lot of the friction, a lot of the issues you're describing tend to go away. The challenge is when we stay at a very generic level and try to put, invoices in front of our trading partners and say, you need to pay for this. And they're asking, what am I getting for the money? We owe it to our trading partners and consumers to educate them on what car they have, what they bought, what the technology is, how it works, and obviously how it has to be repaired in the process of fixing those cars. If we don't spend time educating folks on what's going on, we're going to continue, having kind of these difficult conversations as to who will or won't pay, or who will and won't recognize certain repair procedures.
Great question and really fascinating response. Thank you. We also have Michael Latsuka. Michael, I'm unmuting you. You are on the line. And Michael, you might be muted. We don't hear you. Michael, are you there? All right. Sometimes you might have hit mute on your phone. Michael, are you there? All right. Well, are you there? All right. We have several other people with questions. Michael, I'm sorry to get a chance to hear from you. We have Matthew McDonald. Matthew, you have a question?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you great.
Hi, this is Matthew McDonald with Big Sky Collision in Montana. Thanks for all you do. VeriFacts and Aztec, you guys are tip of the spear, so we appreciate the information. I just basically, it's not really a question. I wanted to give you a statement. We were kind of working on the play off the word repair recommendation, and they're the OEM repair procedures, and I think you get a little pushback, and everybody can agree with me in this industry when we use the recommendation and say, well, those are just recommendations, you don't have to follow them. But I can assure you that if you look at the response from ICAR, ICAR's response is that they're not recommendation, that they're specific repair bulletin, repair procedures, and they're to be followed. And everything ICAR does complements them, and so use them first. And then I did some research into the P pages, and they found it so important that they put it in there 14 times. I'll repeat that, 14 times, that you must refer to the OEM repair procedures first, and nothing supersedes them, ever. And I think that's what's important we need to realize. And so when you see, 80% of the people out there not using them, I think maybe it's because that other that we chose is because we didn't feel it that important yet. And I think that it should be, and that should be a huge topic for 2018, that we really push it in the importance, because I'm telling you, the people that make the car and the people that write the database programs and everybody that supports it say that's absolutely the most important thing, and we need to follow it, and there is nothing that supersedes it. So I guess that's my statement.
Good statement. Any comments on that? Jake or Doug, do you want to add anything to that?
No, that's a great point, Matthew. Yep, go ahead, Doug.
No, I was going to let Jake. You want to take that one?
Yeah, so that's a great point. And you know, when we go back to the poll that we ran earlier in the call, you know, you still had, I want to say, was it 30% or 40% that felt that the damage was minor and that the repair procedures didn't have to be pulled. That's an area of opportunity for us as repairers. I challenge every repairer on this phone to go and research bumper-only jobs for the next 2 weeks, and you'll be amazed what you find. You're going to not only find diagnostic steps, you're going to find repair versus replace concerns, one-time use parts, all kinds of goodies that are going right out the door and not being dealt with until Friday at 5 o'clock when we're trying to get the car out. So that's a good point, Matthew.
Thank you. We also have a question from Trey. Trey, I don't have your last name, but Trey, can you hear us?
Yeah.
It's
Trey Compton. Yeah, I'm Trey Compton from Artistic Auto Body in Portland, Oregon. And I had a question as far as, so I handle a lot of the scanning and stuff, but I had a question as far as how do you guys handle with different OEMs, like with the Subaru updates where you guys were having problems with certain year Subarus? Are you guys able to work with Subaru on that, or is it something you guys have to tackle on your own?
Yeah, Jake, I'll take that one. So when Subaru introduced the new version of their new update to their tool, the SSM4, their previous version, they had a backward compatibility issue. And you know, part of what happens with the manufacturers is they end up deprecating or updating their tools on such a frequency. I've got a team of people here who do nothing but update tools. That sometimes they run into issues. And as a result of that, we work with the manufacturers to resolve those. And you know, it's the same issues we have with dealers. I mean, dealers, you know, will tell you the same thing, that the tools and updates they get, you know, can in fact sometimes cause problems for either older cars or even sometimes the newer ones. So we work closely with the manufacturers to resolve those issues in a timely way. But you know, our issue, as you can imagine, is complicated by a factor where a Subaru dealer just deals with Subaru tools. I'm dealing with Honda, Toyota, GM, Chrysler, all of them. So our biggest pinch point, our biggest challenge is usually in the September timeframe when all the new updates are coming out for all the new models. You know, the OEMs don't make perfect scan tools and they don't do all perfect updates. So if they have issues with their tools, you know, we definitely feel it pretty quickly. But we're also very, you know, we're high on their list for response, and we work closely with them to troubleshoot those issues and get them resolved. But that's a great question.
And we have time. We'll see if we have time for one or two more, but we do have a burning question from Brandon Chittenden. Brandon, you are on the line.
Sorry, it wasn't really burning, but it was more a comment back to the accessibility of OEM data. I was one of those that put an alternate answer. I would say that from what I hear from the shops is that it's really a combination of all of those factors as to why they don't use the OEM service information. But I'd also add to that a lot of it has to do with a reticence by the OEM to provide that in a way that's friendly to the shops and other data providers and make it accessible at a cost that's reasonable.
Any thoughts or feedback on that one?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Brandon. I think that there's a couple of things right out of the gate that could make things easier. Providing a day pass option for every OEM information site, I think, would be good. I know that Honda does that, which is cool. The other one being is offering PayPal access to where I can have an employee that works for me in the shop pay for access to the repair information without me being there. I think that's another thing they could do. A Google search engine type feature to try to find everything that you need to know about a bumper cover or a quarter panel or a windshield. Being able to search that. And a lot of them do have some of that search capability, but some of the others are very difficult where you're bouncing between 4 and 5 manuals to get what you need. So we're going to have to start using technology to navigate this repair information faster so that we can get the cars out on time. I agree with you.
So thank you. So we have time. We have time for one very brief question, And this is our last question. So, David Riviero, you're live.
Great. Thank you very much. Just wanted to, follow up a little bit on the discussion here around the language. And I think that's probably a critical piece with the OEs is that when they are stressing in a standardized process, they should use words like must. And I'm hoping that in some way we can maybe get messages to the OEs that when they are putting out the position statements, that they use a similar type of language so that we can make it a little bit easier process for the industry to talk to insurers so that there is no confusion around what can or should be done versus what must be done.
Yeah, that's a good point, David. And in fact, if you take that same OEM and look at the owner's manual for that car, you see that exact verbiage. Or you look at the sun visor above your head when you're sitting in the car, and you've got the warning and you could be killed and the skeleton with the crossbones and the whole bit because they're speaking to the consumer. And I found that insurers, bill payers are more like consumers than they are technicians in some cases. So you're right. I think that carrying over the severity of a situation over to the service manual is important. I agree with you.
So, Doug and Jake, it has been such a pleasure having you here, and this audience is really inspired by you. We have a lot of questions remaining. So I would, if it's all right with you, if you wouldn't mind sharing an email address so people that were unable to get their questions answered could reach out to you. If you're comfortable sharing your email address, we really appreciate it. And we can send that out after the call, or if you have any other questions, you can always email info@verifacts.com, at verifactsauto.com. I, again, want to thank both of you. It was a fascinating call. And I also want to remind everyone we have the symposium coming up February 12th. We have an awesome hands-on interactive session on February 11th. I really encourage you to come early and have that opportunity. And even sooner than that, we have a call coming up on Thursday, February 8th at 11 a.m. Pacific. So early February is the month for VeriFacts. It's an exciting month. I see the email addresses are on the screen share. So if you're looking at the screen share, it's very easy for you to email Jake and Doug directly. If you don't have it in front of you, Jake's email is jrodenroth, JRODENROTH, at aztech.com. Or you can reach Doug at dkelly, DKELLY, at aztech, ASTECH.com. Again, thank you all for coming. We look forward to hearing you on the call, and I really look forward to hopefully having the opportunity for all of us to be together in person at the symposium. Have a wonderful remaining January, and look forward to hearing and seeing you in February.